continuously keep evolving, or you will start dying while still living.
Healthy life is restlessness. That's a healthy life. There's going to be ups and downs.
There's a hero inside of everyone waiting to be awakened. And the reason I know that is because I was a coward, and there was a hero inside of me. And when he woke up, he changed my life.
Welcome back to Mulligan Brothers. Today's video, as always, was sponsored by Huel. I'm drinking Huel Black Edition, which has 26 vitamins and minerals, 35 grams of protein and slow release carbs to make sure that I can stay satiated and proteined up whilst I make these documentaries. If you want to find out more about these, go to the link in the description. I'll talk about them a little bit later on in the video.
When you start to tap into the things that inner child wants to do, is that the path to purpose? We have this question all the time about trying to find purpose. We're talking about when you're not aligned, it's difficult to find purpose.
Well, I studied nature's laws, which is the oldest living laws. You know, you drop a seed into the ground in rich soil, give it proper water and sunlight, and learn what weeds are and keep the weeds out. And then however you nurture the seed is what grows the feed. And so when it comes to purpose, I don't think in terms of, people like, oh, my purpose is to feed the kids in Africa and things like that, or my purpose is to retire my mom. I'm thinking in terms of, okay, what's the tree's purpose? To stretch its roots down as far as possible, grow as high as possible, stretch its limbs out as far as possible, grow as many fruits as possible, many leaves as possible, literally grow to its max. Birds fly high as possible, fly far as possible. And I'm like, so if I go to the human, could my purpose be to experience the fullness of life? Could it be to grow to my max? And I'm not talking about the growing that is like me growing in height. I'm talking about the growing of my mind. The essence of life is growth, Jim Rohn said. All right, what does that mean? Continuously keep evolving, or you will start dying while still living. And I started making my purpose to grow to the fullest expression of what it means to be Garrain Jones. What is that like? People will ask me, they're like, yo, man, who are you following right now? Who's the person that is supporting you with the most growth? And I'll say myself. And it was like, oh, that's vain. I was like, no, what you didn't ask me is which version of myself. What do you mean? Me 10 years from now inspires me so much. Why do you say that? Because literally 10 years ago, when I even came up this, it was 10 years back then, I was $250,000 in debt. I tried to take my life twice. My mom was dying in the hospital. My girlfriend had left me because I couldn't take care of my life, lived in my car for 2.5 years. All of that was happening simultaneously. And 10 years later, I have 2 7-figure businesses. I've spoken at the time in 62 countries all over the world. I'm in rooms with some of the most powerful business minds. That was only 10 years. So someone said to me, oh, that's easy for you to say. You got all the money and all the cars, man. You do not fucking know what it took for me to get here. And guess what? When I was living in my storage unit, sleeping in an abandoned building on bubble wrap, I had over 125 videos out, and I had 250,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's since then canceled the account. When I was transforming my life, I didn't understand if I'd have kept it going, what would happen. But my series was called The Storage. Nobody knew I lived in my actual storage. It had great lighting, kind of like this set, and it was all white walls. And I'm just talking about things that fire that was inside. And people were like, wow, man, I'm so inspired. I didn't know it was going to land to all of this. But what you're experiencing in my life right now is the overflow of the work that I put in 10 years ago. Wait till you see 10 years from now. So that's the inspiration. The inspiration is like, if this can happen in 10 years, the direct inverse of who I was being to who I am now, breathing life into humanity. Now, on the upward trajectory of my life, really investing over $250,000 into personal growth and mentors and masterminds per year, and like really giving back to humanity and really understanding the flow of how giving and receiving actually works, and committed to developing myself personally and learning all these interpersonal skills and also teaching people that, I can't even begin to imagine what the next 10 years could look like when there's been nothing but an upward trajectory. That inspires me big time. And the dude was like, wow, I never thought about that. Yeah, me 10 years from now, continuously doing what I'm doing and committed to personal growth. And it has me continuously creating from the possibility of the future and not a recreation of my past.
You just said before this, when it's the thing you want to run away from, run towards. I mean, it's kind of similar with the stuff you were coming to help other people with as well. Mm-hmm. Was there an attraction to the more difficult it was, the harder times people were facing, the grittier it was, the more you were going to get involved with it?
Well, I think some of it is, I always perceived myself to be a coward. I felt like I was afraid of everything. And I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of rejection. I was afraid of getting bit by a dog. I was afraid of heights. You pick it. I was afraid of it. And I think one day I just realized that what you fear establishes the boundaries of your freedom. And I was living in a self-contained prison, a self-made prison. So I decided to flip the script for myself, and I decided to use fear to my advantage. Whatever I was afraid of, I moved toward. So I remember being in a gym, and there was this girl that I thought was gorgeous on the other side of the gym. I was so shy and so introverted and terrified of girls. And I remember walking all the way around that gym and asking her to dance. And she looked at me and said, no. And I walked all the way back and sat down. And my friend said, what'd you say? And she said, no. I said, what'd you do? I said, I walked back. He said, was there a girl sitting next to her? And I said, yes. He goes, why didn't you look at her and say, would you like to dance? And it shifted something in my brain. And I thought, don't just ask once and don't just look for one option. Use fear to your advantage. And I just started doing that with everything. I was afraid of roller coasters, so I went on the fastest ones. I was, if I was afraid of the dark, I would just dive into deep, dark places. And I was afraid of rejection, I would just go out and go ahead and ask. If I was afraid of failure, I would go and try. And by the time I was in my 20s, I had a reputation for being an insane risk taker. And it was actually really accurate and assessment. I mean, I would walk into projects with armed guards with Uzi machine guns in every entry, cocaine stacked to ceilings. And I would walk in and make contact with the owners of drug cartels and begin to talk to them about life and God. And people actually made bets on what day I would be killed. And I remember one time there was a SWAT team that dropped in on a house and they busted open the door. I had a couple of interns with me and they were just apprenticing with me. I said, let's go. We run into the house. I mean, they're is it not an FBI, but who the agency?
Oh, yeah.
Is it ATF or something?
Yeah, ATF.
They're in there with their, body armor and weapons. And there's this massive, muscular guy named Maverick that, I discovered his name later. And they're about to go into a huge conflict. I jump in between the military And I looked at this guy and I looked at the police and I go, I got this. Because he was going to get shot and killed. And his girlfriend was there and there's all these, and I just talked the guy down. I get him settled. I convince them not to arrest them. They finally all leave. I sit down with him and work out the situation, help him realize his life could be better. We leave, the interns go, how long have you known that guy? I said, never met him in my life. and so there was this sense where the moment my heart would pound and I saw like danger or I saw risk, I just trained myself to move hard and fast. It opened up the whole world to me. It's why I was able to sneak through Lebanon to Syria and walk the streets of Damascus and fly into Pakistan. When on the plane, I was warned that if I do anything illegal, I will be arrested or killed in the country. And I learned the difference between thrill and risk. I did like thrill.
Yeah, when did you learn that? Sorry, this is your podcast, but I would like to know when. Yeah.
When my kids came to me and said, Dad, would you stop taking unnecessary risks because we'd like to not be fatherless.
Kids change it, man. Yeah. Kids change it. Yeah.
And I knew I had to mitigate that request. So I made a decision and I said, I won't take unnecessary risks, but I will take the ones that make the world better or that can bring a positive change. And that's when I shifted from that adrenaline rush of, thrill and risk and that strategic intention of a risk that matters. And so I look back and I realize, I think all of us are trying to, create a counterintuitive story. If we feel we were insignificant, we try to find significance and we try to give people significance, right? If we need to be healed and we find healing, then we try to heal other people. And for me, mine has always been, there's a heroic narrative inside of everyone. There's a hero inside of everyone waiting to be awakened. And the reason I know that is because I was a coward, but there was a hero inside of me. And when he woke up, he changed my life.
The second part of this is the anxiety part. I mean, what is anxiety and how can people deal with it and move past it?
So what is anxiety and how do you deal with it and how do you grow through it? I want to distinguish between clinical anxiety and we'll call it more day-to-day anxiety. Clinical anxiety, there are people who have that anxiety or depression even, and they may need a professional like a psychiatrist or a /therapist who will maybe prescribe a medication. I'm not pushing medication necessarily, but there are medications today that don't solve the problem, but they lower the temperature so the anxiety is not as intense. And we all know anxiety creates more anxiety. Anxiety doesn't let you make good decisions. You become impulsive, reckless even. So sometimes you may need that, and you also would need to talk to someone. So I don't want to talk about that, because if you need a professional, you should go to a professional. It's not going to be my few words here. But I want to talk about the anxiety that we have more control over. That's not a chemical imbalance or something chemical or clinical. So I think a good way to put it is this. There's a healthy anxiety even. We'll call it angst, healthy angst. I know the word anxiety sounds terrible, but let me explain. I remember was a guy, he was a cardiologist, a heart doctor, came to one of my classes. And he was a really sweet guy, but he had a very difficult life, personal and health. He had a lot of issues, challenges. And I always really felt for him. One day he comes to me, he says to me, I'm such a terrible week I've had. Maybe you can do something, intervene, and I'd like to have a peaceful week, just total peace. Now, he had a good sense of humor. So I said to him, so you mean like a flat line? So he said, no, not that peaceful. A flat line in a cardiogram is a sign of death. You don't want a flat line. A heartbeat, a healthy heartbeat looks like a wave, like that, like a wave. There's the contraction, expansion of the heart, like the breath, exhale, inhale. So a flat line means the heart is stopped. So means he's basically saying, and this is the point I want to make, that healthy life is restlessness. That's a healthy life. There's going to be ups and downs. Every heart that beats is contracting and expanding all the time. The journey of life is up and down. When it goes to extremes, if you have an extreme up, it peaks too high or goes down too low, that's when you get into either high levels of anxiety or high levels of depression or resolution. Like, people who are so calm and relaxed and they're never restless, that's also not healthy. They're just sitting, they're not motivated. So you want to always have a certain healthy measure of restlessness and angst, but not one that's so extreme that takes control of your life. So I think it's important to understand that we all need a certain element of longing, seeking, reaching, yearning. If you don't have that, you're not human. And I actually cite a verse in the book of Proverbs. It says, the soul of a human being is a divine flame. It's a flame of God. Look at a flame. A flame never rests. It's always flickering. It's always restless. That's what a soul is like, a restlessness. The body could be the body can become extremely lethargic and almost like dead. You're just sitting around. But the flame is always that spirit. And when you see somebody who's stopped flickering, it's not a good sign. If they lack the sparkle in the eye, whatever the reason, there's something missing. Okay, so it's important to know that the soul is a flickering flame, always restless, and longing is necessary, and longing is always going to create, I don't have it yet. So that's going to create some form of angst. I don't want to call it anxiety. When it spills over to the point that it's so much anxiety, so much tension, and you don't have resolution, that's the problem. So there's actually a mystical concept called tension and resolution. You always need that measure. Tension means you're longing for something, you're seeking something, and then you find it and integrate it. And then you continue climbing. So it's always important to look up and then try to gain and internalize it and then continue climbing. I'll just share a story. There was a story with I bring that in the book, Toward a Meaningful Life, in the chapter on body and soul, that there were children playing on a ladder. And all the children were afraid to climb to the top, except one child. He climbed all the way to the top. So his grandfather, who was watching, said to his grandson, tell me, why were you the only one that had the courage to climb to the top of the ladder? And his answer was brilliant. He said, because when the other children were climbing, they kept looking down. So they saw how high they were. They were afraid to climb higher. When I was climbing, I kept looking up. I saw how low I was, so it motivated me to climb higher. So a healthy, growing human being is always looking up. And when you look up, you always see horizons you haven't conquered yet. So it's a motivator. But there's also going to be a measure of tension, a measure of angst, and that's healthy. So don't think just because you have some anxiety, maybe it can be turned into something that you want something, translate it, what do you want, and now figure out how to get it. Now, when anxiety goes overboard, then you need the other side. You need something to resolve. You need something where you can find peace and calm and say, okay, what is it that I'm anxious about? And let's see if I can resolve it. And again, I'm distinguishing this from clinical or chemical anxiety or depression.
I love that mentality. It was towards the end of the day, you spoke about wealth, and I think you said something along the lines of giving yourself permission to be as wealthy as you want to be, but to be in a position to help other people. Yeah. It's not spoken about. I think so many people, they see wealth as this, I think you said it as well, within like the church, it's frowned upon almost. And on socials, it's frowned upon, it's kill the rich, kill the wealthy, but they are in the position, the wealthy are in the position to be able to help people. And you can criticize how people are helping people, but at least they're in the position to be able to help somebody. And if you can get in that position, you have the ability to be able to help people as well. And again, with our community, that's something we promote massively, is like, get yourself in a position to be able to help people. And look after yourself first, make sure that you're in a stable place, but then be able to help people. And I love that message you was closing out with today.
Yeah, I just think that if you have the capacity to create wealth, it's a lack of responsibility to not create it. Because people don't have the same capacity. There are people smarter than me, people more talented than me, people more gifted than me. And there are perhaps people I'm more gifted or more talented or more intelligent than. And you can't measure people equally. You have to take responsibility and stewardship for what you have. And somebody was born in Ethiopia. They do not have the opportunities that you have when you're born in Los Angeles. They might have the same intellectual capacity or talent, or innate capacity, but not have the opportunity. If you have the opportunity, to me, you have the responsibility. And if you, this guy who graduated from UCLA, and when he graduated, he said, I don't know what to do now, and his parents spent so much money on his school. And I said, you mean, what do you mean? He goes, to pay the bills. I said, you just graduated from UCLA and your parents spent a few $100,000 to send you to school, and your entire motive in life is to pay the bills. You need to create a company that provides 1,000 people with jobs, so that you're providing 4,000 people with meals, so that all of these families have roofs over their heads and food on the table and an opportunity for them to live their greatest dreams. If you have the capacity, to me, you have the responsibility.
Wow. It's interesting you say that. It's just reminded me of my dad. So my dad wasn't in our lives, at all. Single. My mum's amazing. 7 kids, by herself. Yeah, absolutely amazing. And we were boisterous. There's 5 boys. Like we were pretty hectic. But my dad, he had that capacity to build wealth, and he's from nothing, and he can, he can. Like build a company, he'd crash it pretty quickly, but he could build these companies up, and and he had that capacity to build wealth, but he didn't have the empathy or I don't know, the ethics to turn it to good. There was, so where does that come from? Like, and the I don't know, it's a difficult one. Like, do we decide to do good, or we're born into a situation where we don't understand what good is? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's one of the things that drove me to write Mindshift was that 2 things. One is I felt like more people were afraid of failure than success. And ironically, fewer people crumble under the weight of failure than crumble under the weight of success. And if you don't develop the internal infrastructure, the character base to handle great success, you will use all of that power and wealth, fame, whatever you have, for your own good. And you'll become basically a black hole where everything is being consumed by your desire, by your greed, by your lust. And everyone around you gets consumed by you rather than having everything around you actually flourish. And so one of the reasons I wrote Mindshift, and the first Mindshift in the book, is it's all about people. What you're describing when someone has great wealth and they destroy all the relationships around them is someone who actually didn't mature. When you're small, and I write about this in chapter 1, you see life as all about things. And so it's toys. And then when you watch children play, they're all fighting over the same toy. There might be 20 toys, but the only toy that has value is the other toy that some kid has. And when you're small, you think life is about things. As you mature, you shift from things to experiences. You think life is all about experiences. It's the first kiss, your first date, your first, whatever football game, your first, goal. Everything is about experiences in life. And then if you mature, it moves from things to experiences to relationships. But the problem is a lot of people get older, but they never grow up. So they're still about things. It's just not Legos. It's Lamborghinis. Life is still about things. Or they grow to the adolescent stage where it's still about experiences. It's just not a first date. It's owning a yacht and a plane and traveling the world and going to Mars. And you just have to have another experience and another experience and another experience, because life is still all about experiences. Which is, by the way, why a lot of times hyper-successful people get married 4 or 5 or 6 times. Because it's not about the relationship. It's about the experience that other person can create for you. But if you mature, you go from things to experiences to relationships. It doesn't mean you still don't have things. Of course you have things. And it doesn't mean you don't have experiences. You have even better experiences. But now life is all about relationships. And I think what you're describing with your father is someone who achieved great success, but never matured to the place where he realized it's all about people. And it's one of the driving principles. The first mastermind I think I spoke to during the pandemic, because all of these guys didn't care about the pandemic, they were super wealthy, and they were making more money during the pandemic than before the pandemic. And so they asked me to come and speak to them. And I remember getting up there and saying, I'm not going to teach you how to get rich. I'm going to teach you how to not to die alone. Because they were all richer than me, but they were also all alone. And I have this mastermind that I lead now, and it really started because I sat down with a guy who, when he was 29, had his first $100 million company. And I think actually became a $1 billion company. And then he lost it all because his board fired him because he was such a jerk, and from his own description. And then he spent the next year rebuilding another $100 million company. So he's very good at what he does. And I'm at this event, and I see him, and we sit down together, and we start a conversation. And I remember I looked at him, and he asked me, what do you see? And I said, what I see is that you're going to die alone. You've made choices in your life where you do not allow anyone within the inner circle of who you really are. No one sees you, no one knows you. You communicate a message to everyone, stay away from me. And later on that day, another guy who was super successful came and said, hey, that guy told me you talked to him, that you slapped him around, and he used more colorful language. And that night he said, I told my friends, I can't believe he talked to me this way. No one talks to me this way. And then a couple hours later, he came and said, what do I do? So I started my mastermind, and I said, say yes. Say yes to people who invite you into their lives. And he signed up within 30 seconds. And one of the things I've discovered is that people who are hyper successful become terrified of letting people into their life because they're not really sure if people love them or the benefit of being near them. And so if you don't develop the value of relationships early, it's almost impossible to develop them when you're successful. It's just like the person who says, I'll be generous when I'm rich, but right now I'm too poor to be generous. If you don't learn generosity when you're poor, you will never become generous when you're rich. The values that you want to take and scale, you need them at the beginning.
You've spoken of your relationship quite a few times. What are the qualities that you suggest people look for, or that are essential to a great partner?
I will share with you with this. When I attracted my wife, notice I didn't say when I attracted my girlfriend. I didn't attract a little girl pretending to be a woman, acting like a child, who then I start to date, who then I wanted to see if this was the right thing, who then I made a wife. She was already a wife. I changed her name on my phone the day we connected. I was like, this is Blair Jones. So I never saw her as a girlfriend. She had qualities I didn't even know I wanted. So the nurturing quality, that's number one. Can your partner nurture? This is a guy or a girl. Can your partner nurture? You know, Blair she's a nurturer. She's also a disciplinary. Yeah, she's structured and detailed in ways that I can't even fathom how she does what she does. I'm just like, who does that? But who I am and my genius also supports her in the way in which she's learning. So we're like stair-stepping. So I would definitely, sometimes people are like, this person is exactly like me. Ooh, that's a trap. Because you are going to hit a roadblock of growth if they are exactly like you. It would not have worked if Blair was free-flowing and just like go with the flow and win, and I'm free-flowing, going with the flow, because we wouldn't get anything done. If you're wanting to build a legacy and move the relationship forward, there has to be polarity. And I believe finding somebody who has a counterpart in the areas of your weaknesses, but also an understanding of how to be compassionate and patient with your process. So patience, nurturing, access to masculine and feminine, because there's some times where I don't want to lead, where Blair can clearly lead. And there's sometimes she doesn't want to lead. I can clearly lead. That's masculine energy. And there's sometimes I want to be nurtured. Sometimes she wants to be nurtured, And so those, they work together, not saying that's going to work for everybody's partnership, but inside of the dynamics of my needs, wants, and desires, it works. It works in business. It works in partnership. It works with our friends group. It works for what we're creating in the world. And a willingness to have spaciousness for the areas and where your partner, I won't say weak, but is the most growth opportunity. And so I think those are some basic principles. Like I could literally on our first date, I could see Blair as the mother of our children and my wife. And I told her on the first date, I didn't need enough evidence for what my heart already knew. So I was willing to bet on myself and bet on the future. It's like you'll bet on this, you'll bet on this stock, and you'll bet on the crypto, and you'll bet on this. Like, oh man, you gotta go in strong. Oh yeah, but why are you being weak in a relationship? Why you need 7 years? You weren't doing that with crypto. That's probably you don't see the value in what it's like where commitment comes first. Needing enough evidence to commit is not commitment. That means you lack faith. So that means you're not operating, you're not accessing the power of co-creation, because faith clearly is not a priority.
Do you think it should hit you as hard as it hit you? Like, this is the woman for me.
I think everybody is different. It needed to hit me hard because that's kind of like the cycle of my life. Like I fall hard, physical, split my calf in two is always something but then I started winning hard too. I win big. So that's kind of like the nature of my life. And at that time I was very stubborn. So I never saw the signs. So it had to be something that was a clear sign. And I'm like, this is my person. And I'm willing to commit up front, drive the Triton deep into the ground, demagnetize the weapons of mass distraction. And I think that was really, really, really big. And I'd already had something in my life that was evident of when I decide with my whole self, that thing has longevity. Never had a sip of alcohol in my life. And I remember at 5 saying, hey mom, because my mom was a bartender, but my dad was an alcoholic and my aunt was an alcoholic. I said, hey mom, that can turn a person into that? Why would anybody drink that? That logically didn't even make sense. As a 5-year-old, I said, never having a drink, never been tempted. So I knew when I decide with my full self, and I'm almost 45, never been tempted to do something, I knew I had the capability to commit to a woman in that way.
Today's episode, as always, was powered by Huel. This stuff has been absolutely crucial to my training and the world record I just broke, the world's heaviest marathon, where I carried 220 pounds for 28 miles. Yes, I achieved it, guys. It is done. This is what I was drinking. Huel Black Edition. It has 35 grams of protein, 26 vitamins and minerals and slow release carbs. And it's what I use in my training all the time. But don't just take my word for it. People like the hardest geezer ran across Africa drinking this stuff. It's absolutely amazing. And if you want to get exclusive offers and deals, go to the link in the description and you can find out more about their other products like their daily greens and their meals, which I eat every single lunchtime. Thank you to Huel for sponsoring the video, and let's dive back in to the episode.
On the idea of love, I think a lot of people have these overwhelming feelings towards somebody. And because they feel it so intensely, they're like, this feels like it's enough. Even though it's not shown through respect or action to the other partner, they feel because these emotions are so strong, it's enough. Which I think kind of plays into somewhat what we spoke about around narcissism and having these, you know, this idea in your head. I'm curious as to just coming back to the idea of narcissism and where do you think it grew from? Do you think it's something that is more prevalent at the moment through including social media and the want and desire for things and the want and desire for stuff for yourself at all times?
It didn't happen by itself. It's almost 100 years of brainwashing. Hollywood. All of life has become Hollywood. We don't live real lives, we live Hollywood lives. And Hollywood's message is, love is everything, and you deserve everything, and you need to have everything. We have been fed this message, bombarded from all directions. Life on Earth is Hollywood now. It's not real life. So no, love is not going to keep you together, and it's not all you need. That's Hollywood. And no, you don't need this car, and you don't deserve this car. These are all fake brainwashing messages to get you to buy stuff. That's all it is. And in the meantime, it completely destroys your moral fiber. How sick is it to say, if I love you, you are the most important person in the world. If I stop loving you, you're nothing. Now, is that frighteningly disturbing? Your value depends on my loving you? That's dangerous. It's dangerous. Romeo and Juliet. If I can't have you, oh, that's not narcissism. It's terrible. So all these beautiful shows, these beautiful movies and television shows, full of love, it's so toxic. It's such poison. Have you ever heard the word intimacy mentioned in any of these books or movies? Or have you heard the word respect? Disrespect, yes. Oh, you disrespected me. But who respects anybody? Nobody. And it's frowned on. Nobody respects. That's not even acceptable. Yeah, it's pretty sad.
Just, I wanted to go into some practical steps, into some of the things we've just spoken about. What practical steps would you take to finding the right person to get in a relationship with?
Step number 1. Do you have a life? When you ask someone to marry you, you're asking them to step into your life. Do you have a life? no, we'll ride off into the sunset and make a life together. No, you won't. You're going to start depending on each other, then being disappointed in each other, and then blaming each other for not having a life. Before you ask someone to join you, you got to have something to join. What is your life? That's the first compatibility issue. Does she want to share the life you have or envision? If she doesn't, then forget about it. Are you going to give her the life she's expecting to have? If not, forget about it. Love is not bigger than life. So not love first and then we'll figure out life. No. That's childish. Secondly, if you're going to get married, as a man, you have to stop being a man and become a husband. And as a woman, you have to stop being a woman and become a wife. People get married without any intentions of being husband and wife. Just a man and a woman. Because of Hollywood. There's no glamour in being a wife. They destroyed it. There's certainly no glamour in being a husband. There's agony. There's sacrifice. Some of the movies are, husband and wife sacrificing for each other. So yeah, there's a lot of cost, but no benefit to being a husband or being a wife. So husbands and wives find each other indispensable. You're not a good husband without a wife. But you can be a healthier man without a woman. You can be a healthier woman without a man. So as a man and a woman, you really don't need each other. Men don't need women. That is such a shocking statement. But it's so true. Take Hollywood out of the picture. It's so true. A man does not need a woman. To be a man? None. In fact, if there's a woman in his life, it complicates his life. He's got to adjust. He's got to not be such a man. A woman without a man in her life is so much healthier. Just a woman, free to be a woman. So a man and a woman should not be in a relationship because they're going to destroy each other. A husband and wife, that's amazing. So if you don't intend to become a husband, don't get married. Don't abuse women because you're going to. Using women is the same as abusing. The third thing is the respect. Don't lower your standards at home. Have higher standards at home. Standards of respect, standards of decency, standards of dignity. Don't lower your dignity. Not to your wife. You lower your dignity, it makes it harder for her to respect you. If she can't respect you, she doesn't really love you. If she doesn't really love you, you're going to hate her.
I think in life, like you say, there is this inevitable suffering that comes with being alive. When something happens like grief or loss or something really difficult, and you've not prepared for it, you've not understood this sort of concept of embracing pain, how would one go through that? And what is, I hate to have this terminology because I don't know how to explain it. Like I told you, I'd lost my son just before starting Mulligan Brothers, so 8 years ago now. And I have no words for explaining this apart from this horrible way of saying it, is that there was some silver lining to it. Like there was, coming through the other side, completely transformed who I was. But I struggle to say that on camera because I think some people will go, that's just such a terrible thing to say. Yeah, I mean, as you know, through the people you've experienced and some of the maybe the suffering you've seen, is there an explanation for suffering and going through suffering that life deals with you? Not chosen suffering, but this unchosen suffering we sort of have to deal with.
Well, first of all, I'll just tell you another story. Many years ago, I got invited to sit on a panel of in the Northern Territory of Australia. Let me see if I can just find the better words for this. So many years ago, I was invited to attend this conference of Year 10 students, which I think is about 16, yeah, from all different schools in the Northern Territory in Australia. And I was on a panel with a famous cricket player, a mental health professional, and another lady who was kind of coordinating everything. And all of these teenagers, they could text questions to the coordinator, who would then field them to the panel. And one of the questions was that one of these teenagers had lost someone that they loved. They died, and she was struggling with the grief. Yeah, it was really hurting her, and she was asking for help processing this grief. And I'm sitting here, then I had the cricketer next to me, and then there was the counsellor on the end. And the counsellor says, what you need to do is you need to create a new network. So if this was the person that you were relying on, what you need to do now is transfer that to someone else, another family member, another friend, and you've got to start to really rely on them. Meanwhile, the cricketer is leaned across like this to me and said, I've got nothing. And so fortunately, they went straight to me next. And I was listening to the counsellor, and I was thinking, well, this person is in pain because they've lost someone that they're relying on for their emotional support. And if they transfer that dependency onto someone else, they're not really solving the problem. They're really just kicking the can down the road, because if anything happens to the person that they're now relying on for their emotional support, they're going to be back in the same position of vulnerability again, because they're dependent. They continue dependent. And so it seems to me that when dealing with this unchosen suffering and grief that comes in life, you still have to ultimately find, I'm not saying that we shouldn't rely on loved ones for emotional support, but ultimately we have to find the answers to this pain within ourselves. And we need to start to regard ourselves as being the emotional support for others, as opposed to becoming too dependent upon others. And in terms of like how to process grief in a way that makes us a stronger person, I always say first thing is to follow this process of accepting pain, because whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, it's still pain. And sometimes you don't want to look at it, but you have to. Like, you have to just stop and be in pain. And as you start to develop this ability to have a relationship with your own pain and suffering, you can then start to consider all the people in the world who have had the same pain. So like with this person, this girl, I said to her, like, right now, millions of people in this world are losing their loved ones. If you can open your heart to them, knowing that you know what they're going through, that change in perspective is not only going to bring you peace, just the change in perspective. Because when we're experiencing grief or pain, everything is focused here, like all the spotlights are on us. But when we start to think there are millions of people going through this, the intensity of that focus is going out, it's changed. And so instead of feeling like almost like a victim of the circumstances, you start to see that we're in an existence where people go through pain. And we can think, I know their pain because I've had it. And what happens is it starts to turn into compassion. Like, I know what they're going through. And in your mind's eye, in your imagination, you can see their grief. And I think sometimes it will make you cry, you know, like you can have tears running down your cheeks, but deep in your heart, there's this peace, because that compassion is beautiful. Like it's a connection with your fellow human, it's with other beings, you know, and it's what makes us, really, it's what makes us special, is that compassionate, loving nature. And when you connect to it, it's again going back to finding direction and purpose. You're sort of connecting with the meaning of your life because you're realizing who you really are as a person. And that can be so cathartic, so healing, so beautiful, and so humbling. And in fact, in the last 20 years as a Buddhist teacher, I've met many people who have lost people. And the most tragic of these are the people whose children have taken their own lives. And I've seen this. I've seen it too often, actually. It's a little bit breaks my heart to think about it. Like when these kids go through this depression and they take their own life, they don't realize the pain that they're going to cause their parents or brothers and sisters. And I met a lady who found her daughter. Her daughter had killed herself, hung herself, and I met the mother who found her, and she was coming to classes to try to get through this. And I could see the devastation in her. And then one day we were talking, and I just had to say, you know, you're never going to be the person you were before this happened. But it doesn't mean you won't become happy. But you're going to become a much deeper person, because you have to connect. You have to go through this practice, and you have to find that beauty within you through connecting with everyone else who's going through pain. And so yes, you're going to find peace, you're going to be happy, but you'll never be that person again. Now, from one point of view, that's scary. Another point of view, maybe it's the meaning of her life, you know. There's many stories of people who go through trauma, whatever that trauma is, but then they use that trauma to help others. And then they become happy, they found the meaning of their life, but through their compassion, because they're connecting to something very beautiful inside.
It's such a hard thing to articulate. Like I struggle to tell people that, you know, the worst thing that ever happened to me also led to some of the best things. It led to the most growth for sure. Is there a way of articulating that? Because there's a lot of people right now who may feel that they can't overcome this thing, or they've buried it. Is there value in trying to go through the process, get to the other side?
You have to listen. The only way, what they say, the only way out is through. You can't avoid it. Once something has happened that is a tragic event, a loss, a death, or anything that is a setback, some people numb themselves. You know, you just self-medicate, and you numb yourself, you distract yourself. But that doesn't mean the pain's not there. It just means you're not feeling it. It's like someone that kills their nerves. So it's not going to last. So the fact is, there's really no way out. It's like, I'll cry, like one great scholar or teacher told a student who had a tragedy, he said, I don't have answers for you, but I can cry with you. Tears are very cathartic. They're very healing. There's nothing wrong to feeling that I'm not okay. It's fine. Some people just need to know that. They think, if I'm weak or vulnerable or I'm hurt or I'm crying, something's wrong with me. No, there's nothing wrong with you. That's exactly what is natural. That when a person suffers, cry. And you don't need answers. And find people that will hold your hand. And if you're a person who's supporting someone who's gone through that, hold their hand, be there for them. You don't need to give answers. You don't need philosophies. You don't need explanations. I always say this, the greatest mind cannot speak to a bleeding heart. So it's not you're going to find some type of brilliant concept or brilliant philosophy that's going to explain away a tragedy. Tragedy is just too strong, too powerful for the mind to fathom, let's be honest. The mind cannot deal with it. So you have to go deeper than the mind. And the place that's deeper than the mind is love, faith, hope, meaning, and purpose. And that's what you hold on to for your dear life. And you just forge ahead. And some days are going to be harder and some will be easier. I'm not going to mince words. I'm not going to say we all know it's not a party. Sometimes it's very painful. But remember, that which doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And if you can move from one day to the next, you get stronger, whether you know it or not. And ultimately what will emerge is a new person. A person that you'll see that you went through the fire and you become a more powerful person in the process. I also say, always speak to others who've been there. So you're not alone. Loneliness is a very big problem here because when you suffer, you think that nobody can understand me. Nobody wants to be around a person who's in pain. They'll never get me. Having others that have been there and the empathy that they can bring to the table is a tremendous healing agent. Absolutely. Never underestimate that. Again, we go back, what pain does, it throws you out of your regular comfort zone. So all the tools that you had yesterday are not working. And that makes you feel desperate. Everything I was using, I thought I was in control of my life. And if I wasn't in control, I was able to do this, and I was able to buy this, and I was able to go to this one, And then suddenly you're left completely helpless and completely vulnerable, naked. And all those resources didn't work. And that is very demoralizing. So the answer is find deeper resources, and they're there. Now you need to dig deeper. There's really no option. And that's really, that's what it comes down to. And allow others in that want to help and could help, and reach out to others. Don't isolate yourself, because isolation and loneliness just exacerbates and makes the problem worse. Because then you marinate in your own pain and just reinforces again how bad things are. You need to be around people who have been through it, who have an optimism, hope. And I'm not talking about naive, just people who understand life, have seen the pains of life, but also seen the strengths that come from it.